This is the program that shows you the side of police chase videos they didn't want you to see. Bungled arrests, kamikaze crooks, and cop-based carnage of all kinds. Welcome to Cops Uncut, the real car crash TV.
On my way.
Cops Uncut, the final report. Welcome to a rather special edition of Cops Uncut. Over the next half an hour, we'll be looking back at some of the very best from the series. The craziest crashes, the biggest balls-ups, and of course, the very fattest cops. If we look at some of the chase footage we've featured, you'll start to notice some very interesting patterns. It may have already become apparent to close followers of Cops Uncut that some policemen just aren't very good at their jobs. Given half the chance, they'll make a complete pig's ear of their arrest, take one look at a dangerous crime scene and run in the opposite direction, or simply crash their cruiser into the nearest solid object. You may also have noticed that cops aren't particularly popular fellows, because when people aren't trying to mow them down with their cars, they're trying to blow them away with their guns. In fact, just about everyone has shot the sheriff, and they've also shot the deputy.
What's up? I've been hit! I've been hit!
But why is it that America's streets are so dangerous? Across the pond, most children spend their formative years plonked squarely in front of a massive TV. Given that people take much of their emotional and behavioural education from trashy cop shows and sensationalised news coverage, it's no wonder that US roads are so dangerous. Thanks to the influence of good old boys like Bo and Luke Duke, or the highway code according to Messrs. Hannibal, Murdoch and Baracus, American driving leaves a lot to be desired. If they see any kind of stunt opportunity, they just can't help themselves.
There you go.
Whether it's a beaten-up van driver trying to evade arrest,
Chester County, 405 Desires ambulance.
or a drunk mum trying to find her way home from a bar. But in many cases, driving like this quite often leads directly to something like this. Sometimes the car might take exception to this kind of punishment and simply spit out the offending driver onto the side of the road. On other occasions, launching your vehicle into the air like this will incur the wrath of the cops who'll just use it as another excuse to bop you round the chops. But by far the most spectacular stunts are the ones that inadvertently land the suspect in a whole heap more trouble. Take this nighttime chase through the streets of Columbus, Ohio. The guy ahead stole this Jeep, but the policeman chasing him has no idea. All he wants to do is tell the driver to put his lights on. The crook probably could have got away, but then he spots an irresistible stunt jump opportunity and takes it, smashing his stolen vehicle headfirst through a wall on the other side. What the bloke doesn't realise is that the wall in question actually belonged to a bank, making him the only criminal in history who has ever broken into a bank by accident.
Taking off again.
It's fair to say that most of the problems police encounter on America's roads are caused by bucket loads of booze. Drinking and driving is a very serious matter indeed. Having said that, the many comedy alcoholics, drunkards and inebriates featured on the show have generously provided Cops Uncut with many of our favourite moments. We all know, for example, that alcohol can make people more amorous.
It's so beautiful to me. I just don't understand nothing else. It's beautiful.
But over the series, we've seen that the hard stuff also has a habit of making you angry and confused.
That son of a bitch right there thinks I'm better than me.
Well, that's okay.
Look him, hold it, look him.
As well as deeply depressed.
Why on earth did God create the world?
It can even lower your inhibitions.
She's gonna tell you how to blow on this machine, okay?
I never blow on that fucking machine.
You're not gonna blow on it for me?
I'm not blowing on you, baby.
No, we can't do that.
Many of the drunks we've had on the show have been quick to deny all alcohol consumption.
Have you been drinking tonight, sir? No, sir. You haven't had anything to drink tonight at all? Not at all. Okay.
I don't drink.
It's okay. I'm not drunk.
Only to prove just seconds later that they're completely and utterly off their face.
I'm not gonna fall.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not.
Occasionally our drunks will even burst into song.
Mr. Sheffield, do you know your alphabet?
A, B, C, D, F, G, H, I, J, K, and so forth. Yeah.
We've also seen a lot of people under the influence doing things that they probably thought were a great idea at the time.
No, you're not, you fucking bastard.
No,
you fuck off.
Like being horrid to the cops.
No, I'm a wiener.
Some of these things you might well regret in the morning, like pulling your pants down and showing the police you're John Thomas. But we've also seen how alcohol can affect you even if you haven't been drinking. These kids were involved in a roadside incident that had nothing whatsoever to do with alcohol. Until a drunk person makes a surprise entry. He's got nothing to do with anyone else here. He was just passing by and had a shaky moment. Most people would be able to establish that hopeless booze hounds like these weren't fit to drive just by looking at them, but not the US police. American cops have developed a series of rigorous sobriety tests to scientifically find out just how sozzled their suspects are. The trouble is, the drunk tests are so complicated that most people who take them are generally too pissed to even understand the rules.
Mr. Reynolds, you can come back over here.
9, sorry. 1, 2,
Mr. Reynolds, you can come back over here to this line.
4. But you said 9 and 9.
Come on over here.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
On top of that, befuddled boozers frequently find it hard to pay attention to the policeman's instructions.
1005. Don't start till I tell you to.
1007,
Miss-
1008,
don't- Miss Reynolds.
1009.
Don't start till I tell you to.
11,
Miss Reynolds, do not start till I tell you to. Put your foot back down.
12.
And before long, a total breakdown in communication occurs.
No! No! I need to have a right to call a phone!
So just how much alcohol do you have to consume to get arrested?
What you have to drink?
This drink driver from Iowa had the answer. Here on Cops Uncut, we've seen a few examples of heavy-handedness caught on camera, and the cops are slowly realizing it's not popular with the punters. But the taser has proved to be a far more welcome means of subduing subjects. The taser is a high-voltage electric shock weapon that can be used to subdue particularly difficult suspects. The boozed-up Texan Man Mountain kicking up a stink in the middle of this road was the perfect candidate for a little electric shock therapy. Particularly when he tries to beat the crap out of anyone who comes near him, threatens to take all his clothes off, and has a bit of a crack at the cops.
Bring me the taser, 5 and a block 11.
So without further ado, the police introduce the drunken hulk to Mr. Taser, blasting him merrily in the back with somewhere in the region of 50,000 volts. Ah, we've got fond memories of the boozy behemoth dropping like a sack of spuds. The massive surge of electricity coursing through his nervous system, causing him to spasm uncontrollably. Naturally, they can't zap just anybody. Over-enthusiastic use of the taser can be pretty dangerous, so it's reserved for special occasions, like when the suspect doesn't want to get arrested.
Put your hands behind your back.
Your hands behind your back.
Rather than carry on scuffling with an unruly crook, it's a whole lot easier to just let him have it in the back. Just because it's marginally more humane than using real bullets, the taser is certainly not immune from police abuse. This Ohio officer seems so pleased that he'd been given the chance to use his favourite toy that he just carried on doling out the punishment again, and again, and again.
You fucking hammer me!
As a bonus, the taser has opened up more and more opportunities for the cops to demonstrate their incompetence. These officers thought their suspect was armed with a dangerous weapon, so they decided to counteract with their tasers. But either they set the voltage too low or they forgot to give their batteries an overnight recharge, because it just doesn't seem to be having any effect. Whenever the guy is zapped, he just grabs hold of the metal wires and yanks them out. Worse still, when this officer gave up with the stun gun and went back to using a real weapon, he somehow managed to shoot his female colleague. This is what the Americans call collateral damage. But some cops haven't done anything wrong and are only guilty of being the donut-munching, coffee-drinking stereotypes that fill our TV screens, literally. It's hard to deny the facts, though. Time and time again, the policeman that appeared on Cops Uncut left little sunlight for others to enjoy. One can only presume that having a weight advantage is high on the list of cops' priorities. Not perhaps an advantage in a foot chase, though. Coming up on Cops Uncut, the final report. How the cops have finished on top in fistfights. The art of using non-lethal force. And our favourites from the soon-to-be sectioned group. Try as they might to keep the peace, the police frequently find themselves forced to abandon diplomatic negotiations in favour of good, old-fashioned fisticuffs. As we've often seen on the show, brawling can be sparked by the most insignificant of things. Sometimes a cop will simply rub his suspect up the wrong way. And it's not always the officer's fault when a fight like this breaks out. It's just that some people find policemen irresistibly punchable. The drunk driver in this clip just seemed to suddenly decide that his arresting officer needed a slap. He clearly had little respect for authority, and when the officer tried to raise a finger, the bully just drove away. But cop punching proved so compelling that the man had to stop his truck a little further down the road and come back for round two. In fact, policemen rarely seem to come off well in one-to-one bare-knuckle situations. When this crook took exception to handcuffs, the officer got the perfect chance to put his hand-to-hand combat training to the test. He tried several precision techniques: the hold-on-tight method, the over-the-leg technique, and the over-the-bonnet method. But the rumble just proved too much for a lone cop to handle. As we've seen, an embattled officer will willingly deputize random members of the public to form part of an unofficial crime-fighting tag team and bring the odds back in his favor. A much better solution was demonstrated in this clip of a nighttime altercation from Arizona. The arresting officer had no trouble subduing his violent suspect, largely because he and 4 of his friends sat on the man until he couldn't breathe. Sometimes there's just no backup, either official or otherwise. And when the going gets really tough, the tough really do get going. But there's a more sinister side to the play fighting we've seen on the show. And that's when an officer of the law takes advantage of his position to dole out a dose of his own handmade variety of justice. It's a very fine line between necessary force and police brutality, but every so often that line is well and truly crossed. Take the way that these police bullies ganged up on their victim. He may well have given the cops a hard time, but whatever this guy has done or said, there's no way he deserves treatment like this, especially as he's already handcuffed and can't fight back. With 4 against 1, it's hardly what we'd call playing by the Queensberry rules. Worse still are the cops who try to disguise their brutality by letting their car do all the dirty work. But if there's one thing more stupid than beating up your suspect or running him down with your cruiser, it's the fact that all these violent cops seem to have forgotten. If they suddenly find themselves unceremoniously kicked off the force, it's because they've captured all the incriminating evidence on their very own dashboard cameras.
260 at the corner.
On my way.
To avoid a lot of that messy, violent combat stuff, we've seen how the police frequently employ a number of non-fatal weapons to bring down their adversaries. Remember the taser from part 1? Well, another favourite from the policeman's arsenal is the pepper spray. Pepper spray, or mace to his friends, is a deeply unpleasant substance that cops squirt at their suspects in order to temporarily blind them. Like all weaponry, the pepper spray is supposed to be reserved for particularly difficult customers. But on Cops Uncut, we've often seen policemen whip out their canister of pocket pain and unload it at people with very little provocation. Apparently, all you need to do to qualify for the liquid burning treatment is to say a rude word.
I'm not violating any law. Yes, you are. You're coming right in the middle of my violence.
You could also confuse your arresting officers with a few modern dance moves, or ride into town on the wrong horse. Once the spray has been administered,
I can't see, huh?
it's much easier to get suspects to do what you want. You can find out if they've done anything wrong later. In some cases, though, mace can have a few unfortunate side effects. We saw this guy whose sinuses had exploded on contact with the liquid. With mucus oozing out of his nose and getting tangled in his beard, at first it seemed a bit cruel of the officer not to lend his suspect a hanky. But eventually it emerged that snot wasn't the only disgusting discharge in this mix.
I'm not touching your face. You have human feces on your face.
I do that.
You do. You've rolled around and shit on the ground over here where you shit on yourself all over the parking lot where you ran from it.
Well, I wouldn't have shit on myself if you wouldn't have maced me.
And I wouldn't have maced you if you'd have done what you were told to do.
I did do what I was told to do.
To be a policeman, you really have to be a people person, because it's frequently the human element of the job that's the most unpredictable. One of the hardest things to deal with is the fact that nobody ever seems particularly pleased to see you. Women in particular often seem less than thrilled when they're approached by a friendly neighborhood cop.
Why are you pulling me over?
Why am I pulling you over, ma'am? Your inspection sticker is expired. Can I see your driver's license,
Oh,
please?
here you go. Just make me a little later to work.
Okay.
Meeting new women should, in theory, be a perk of the job, but unfortunately, it doesn't always work out that way.
Let me see your license, please, and insurance.
I sure do.
Let me see it.
You don't talk back to me.
Hey.
More often than not, you'll just end up with the argumentative type. And even if the relationship does get physical, it's unlikely that you'll ever hear the end of it.
Bob, could you step on it, please?
During his daily duties, a policeman might find himself up against any number of hardened criminals, psychos, and other assorted ne'er-do-wells. Sometimes, though, the most difficult customers are the random nutters.
My mom is the devil. David is my father.
The volatile types who tend to blow a fuse with very little provocation.
No, sir.
The guy in this car has only been stopped for speeding, but it's obvious he has much more profound problems. And it's his unfortunate rearview mirror that bears the brunt of his pent-up rage. As a further demonstration of his displeasure, he rips up some paper and bungs it out of the window. Now he's guilty of illegal littering, and the cop has some harsh words.
Tell you what, sir. If you don't get out and pick all this stuff up, I'm going to give you a citation for littering. You got a problem, sir?
If you think that this cop is having a bad day, then have a look at what this trooper has to deal with when he pulls over a guy in the red 4x4 for breaking the speed
I
limit.
have to plead guilty if I got to work because I can't take the board to take the day off. You goddamn asshole! Now just give me the goddamn thing. Let me get out of here. I didn't do nothing wrong, and I know I did. Now let me get the fuck out of here. It's just about ready to get the fuck out of here. Give me that. You're ripping me off, and I didn't deserve it because I didn't do nothing wrong.
You'd have thought that this level of lip service would have landed this motormouth in jail straight away. But for some reason, the cop chooses to fight back only with the power of sarcasm.
This will explain how you can have a trial if you want one.
A technique that clearly doesn't work.
The fine's right here, sir. It's $137.50.
You're fucking crazy! I get it! You're fucking crazy! My wife took money out of her goddamn account where she's working to pay my fucking insurance so I wouldn't get picked up. You're fucking crazy!
With so many wackos on the streets,
Bye.
it's no surprise that every so often an officer will lose his rag. Someone will come along and just push all the wrong buttons. Like the shoplifters in the car ahead. The crooks have somehow managed to drive straight off the road.
Get out of the car! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get on the ground!
It would seem that the astonishing display of stupidity has made the pursuing officer quite cross.
Get on the ground right now! Get on the ground! Don't anybody move! You caused this whole thing! You idiot! What's wrong with you?
But it's worth keeping that temper in check because this officer hasn't just lost his cool,
Shut up!
he's also lost his voice, and it soon becomes clear that he's just plain lost.
Well, I don't know exactly where I'm at. I'm just in the field here.
So we hope you've enjoyed this series of Cops Uncut. We're sure that when you take a trip across the pond, you won't ever find yourself on the wrong side of the law. But if you do, here are a few nuggets of parting advice from us before we go. Never make a cop cross.
You caused this whole thing! You idiot!
Try and stay in your vehicle, unless you receive an invitation from the police.
Get out of the car! Get out of the car!
Make sure you keep your dog on a lead, because American cops have been known to be less than sympathetic to family pets. Always park your car somewhere safe. But above all, do be careful out there.